Welcome back, guys. And last time we looked at Firebase authentication. So just to demo that again, here you can see if we try to log in here and we type a wrong password, say submit, it will say the password is invalid or the user doesn't have a password. This message comes from Firebase. And if we type in the correct password, it will log us in. However, this is very nice, but it doesn't really do much other than this. So in this video, I will show you how to get the user's email from Firebase, but also how to save your own values like the user's first name, last name, and also the user's age perhaps. So any custom values that you want to save in the user profile using the Firestore database. So first of all, let's see how we can get the user's email. So if we go back to our application here, you will see that when we log in our login function here, we get this user object. So if we were to print that to the console, and let's go back, you will see that once we log in, it will print the user object in our console here, and we can have a look at how that object looks like. And inside of here you can see a lot of details that Firebase gives us of that user. One of that details is the email, but also it's important to notice that this is default info that Firebase stores, but we cannot really change or add a lot of values here. This is this just reflects the actual user account on Firebase. So if we were to print out, let's say, this email value here, we can do that by saying maybe something like, let's do this. Let's change this message which reads, "You are logged in now," to "Welcome back," and then we want the user's email there. So we'll just put the span inside there, and we'll say ID equals user email. Now what we can do is, here in our JavaScript, once you log in, we can set that spans content with the user's email. So let's do that. So we'll do document.getElementById. We'll use that ID, and we will say inner text equals user.user.email. So if you remember correctly, in our object here we have a user, and inside of that we've got a property called user, and inside of that, which is actually an object, and inside of that object there's an email property. That's why we call it like that. And now if we log out and we log in again, you will see no, we haven't saved it yet. Let's just save this and save this. Now if we log out and we log in again, then let's just see, why is it not saving. Let's just have a look here. Welcome back, you're logged in. This should read now welcome back and then the user email. So let's just go back and do a Control F5, and there you can see it says welcome back, but you'll see it's just blank now. So let's log out and let's log in again here, and it should get the correct email now there. And there you can see welcome back, codebasetutorials@gmail.com. So it got our email from this user profile that we logged in with. However, at this point, if we press F5, it's just going to be empty because we're not storing that value. So what we can do is we can actually use the logged in users, the authentication service of Firebase, to get the logged in user. So to do that, instead of necessarily getting it like this, we can just go here and to this offstate listener that we have here at the top and say if user. So if we are logged in, let's then change this to, instead of saying user.user.email, we can say firebase.auth current user.uid. And if we do that, oops, now we're printing the UID, sorry. We can say email, current user.email. And that's a quick way to get the logged in user's email. But let's say, for instance, we want to save our own custom properties for this user, like name, first name, last name, and age. How will we do that? Well, we'll have to store it in our database. So let's do that. First of all, we'll have to set up our database. So if we go to our Firebase account, we have to click on Cloud Firestore. If it's the first time you click on it, it's going to ask you which region you want to set it up in. And I've chosen Europe West, as you can see there. And now we've got the empty Firebase Firestore database. Now what's very important is if you go to rules, it's very important to set up security rules here. So in our database, we want a collection, something like users, and there will be a user ID, and there will be something like a first name, I'm just making an example here, a last name and an age, right? This is what we want our database to look like. So I'm just going to delete this again. So in our database rules, we don't want anyone in the world to be able to write to our database. So that's why we have this kind of catch-all function here that will block any reads and writes. But what we want to do is we want to actually write a rule that will give us access to our authenticated users. So if we go to the Firebase documentation, let's go to security rules here, and we can say write security rules, basic security rules. Now inside here, there's a lot of cool, easy to use snippets. What we want is this one here. Only allow authenticated content owners access. So we're gonna steal this little snippet there, and we will paste it here. And in our case, we want it to be users. So only authenticated users will be able to write to this users collection, and they'll be able to create any document if the UID of that document matches the user ID. And that's what we're trying to do. So first of all, we say if the user is not authenticated, then we won't allow this. And if the UID of that user is not equals to user ID, which is this document that we're writing to, then it will also block it. So we're giving access to our user to write documents. So a user can write a document to his own account, or can update his own account, but he won't be able to update other users' accounts. So now we're all set, but now we need to actually write or implement something that will save that. So first of all, let's go look here in our page here. Oops, cancel. So if we go back to our web application here, you can see it's nice. We can refresh the page and it remembers our user account here, but let's go and add some more details now here. So let's say, let's have a look here. Welcome back. And there's a log out there. Okay. Inside here, let's say we will print the user details. So let's do something like this. And we can have maybe a list here. Something like this. And inside of that, we'll have a span. And that will say ID equals username. And we'll also say user, let's just say first name. Something like that. And we'll copy that for the other fields. Last name. And also age, and we will do the same here. Let's say last name, and we'll call this first name, and we'll call this age. So if we save that and we refresh, you'll see user first name, last name, and age, but at the moment it's just empty. So we will need a way to update our user's first name, last name, and age. Okay, so let's add a little form for that, the same way we did here at the top. So I'm going to, let's just have a look here. I'm going to add just a little H horizontal rule inside here. Let's just see how that looks. Yes, and then we can easily distinguish the different sections here. So I'll add another one here. And we will copy this form that we have here. And we will say, let's call this update user details. And we'll call this update user function, which we are gonna create now. And this will be, let's say, a text field, another text field, and a number field for our age. Okay. Now, if we go and let's just call this first name, let's call this last name, and let's call this age. And this isn't really necessary, but I don't care. Last name and age. And now if we go back here to our page, we have a nice little form here. Let's just make it look a little bit better. Let's add a little spacing here. And there we go. Perhaps let's just add another HR here. Oopsie. Okay, so there you can see, here's our user details, which is empty at the moment. And here we have a little form where we can fill in, you know, our first name and our last name and our age. But at the moment, it's not gonna do anything, right? So let's make it do something. So if we go back here, we have this little form of a function that says update user. So you know, JavaScript, we have to write that function. So let's just use this basic login function that we wrote previously, and we will convert this to the update user function. Let's just make sure, yeah, that is the correct name. And at the same time here, we will get, we will prevent the default event so that the page don't refresh. Now in our case, we want the first name, we want the last name, and we also want the age. Okay, so that's gonna be very easy, and that is just calling the IDs of the form and first name. And then what we want to do is we can remove this code that we copied here. So then what we want to do is we want to actually save this now into our database here. Okay, so how are we going to do that? First of all, we need to add the Firebase Firestore service to our application. Okay, so that's very easy. There, that's been done. Now secondly, what we want to do is once we update our user, we actually want to now store something into the database. Sorry, the scroll is freaking out. So inside of this update user, let's go and add a document into our database. So again, what I'm going to do is, just for demo purposes, I'm going to go to the Firebase documentation, go to Cloud Firestore, let's say add and manage data, add data. So we'll use one of their examples, set a document. Now this is what we want, but also we want to perhaps use this merge through option. So if we have merge through on, when we write to the database, if that value already exists, then it will update it. But if there's a new value, it will add it to that same user object. So we will do that. So I'm going to copy this code exactly like it is on their website. And right here, we will say, we're not going to call it cityref, we'll call it userref. And for DB, we will use Firestore Firebase rather .firestore .collection, and we want to call it users. And for the document name, we want to use our user ID. And to do that, we can just call Firebase off like we did here at the top. Let's use this one here, and we'll get the current user from our currently logged in user using Firebase auth service, and we'll get the current user and we'll use the UID of our current user. Okay, so that document's ID or that document's name is going to be our user's ID. And then what we will do is we will use this user ref and we will say .set, and instead of just saying capital true here, we want to actually set it to these values. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but we'll just, as you can see, this is just a normal JavaScript object inside here. So we will just fill this in with the values that we receive from our form. And just like that, that should now actually save that to our database. So let's test that. If we go back to our form here, let's just make sure we saved. Yes. So first of all, as you can see, the database is still empty. So now what we're going to do is let's save this with John Doe and age is 25. I'm going to say submit. And now if we go to our database and we refresh this page, let's have a look if anything saved. And nothing saved. Okay, let's figure out why. So let's go back here. There's two errors. It says here update user is not defined. So we made a little bit of a mistake there. Let's just see. Update user is in our JavaScript. Let's go back to the HTML here. Let's see update user. Let's just save this and go back here and make sure. So it looks like we are using it correctly. Let's just do a nice Control F5 and that should have solved it. So let's try another one. John Doe, age, let's make it 28. Submit. This time I don't see any errors. It was just a caching thing. So now if we go to our database and we hit refresh here, we should see the data that we just saved. And there it is for sure. You can see the user. This is our user ID that we got from the logged in user. And there is our details. So what is left here is we need to actually display that in these little user details section here. So what we can do is once we saved it, what I would actually like to do is anytime that you're logged in, it should display those values. So if we go back here, these values are user first name, user last name, and user age. So let's go and save that. So if we go back to this little off state changed listener that we have here, we can add another just another little snippet of code here, and we can say user first name, user last name, and user age. But in this case, we're not going to get it from the Firebase auth object like we got our email. In this case, we need to get it from the database. So how will we do that? With a little database get function. So let's go back to the Firebase documentation, Cloud Firestore, and we're going to go to not add and manage data, but read data, and we'll get data once. We'll choose that option. And there is what we need, get a document. And that's exactly what we need because this is a document that we want to get the details from, right? So we will again steal this little snippet of code here. All right. And then once we have a logged in user, we will just grab that document from the database. So again, we will say firebase.firestore collection users, and then we will use the current user's user ID because that is the document ID that we used. Then if the document exists, then we will do this, what we wanted to do here at the bottom. We will set those different fields. We'll set their inner text on the HTML to the actual value. So in this case, you'll see here that we're fetching one document from the Firestore database, which is inside of the users collection, with a document with a document name of our user ID, right? Once we get that document, we actually need to then use this function called doc.data. That function is data, and then we can access those properties that you see here: age, first name, last name, whichever property exists there, right? So we can do that by just saying doc.data, and then we can say first name, and then we do the same for the last name, and we do the same for the age. Okay, and that should be that. So now whenever the user auth state has changed, so when you log in or when you refresh the page, then it will run this little if statement. It will get that document from the database with our user ID, and it will fetch those properties from that object, and it will replace the inner text of those spans that we have here inside here with the actual values from our database. Now let's see if it actually works. So again, I'm gonna, let's say John Doe, it's currently already in our database, right? So we should be able to just refresh the page. So let's see if that works. If I refresh the page, there, sure enough, you can see it. And what's nice about this is now we can say, let's change our name. It's not John anymore. It's now, let's say Bob, and our last name is Marley, and our age is 85 years old, and we say submit. And now if we press F5, surely there is our data from the database. And to prove this, we can log out completely, and here you can see we've completely logged out. I can do a Control F5 to refresh the page, and if we log in again, it should fetch those details automatically from the database, and there you can see it. Another nice thing about this is we can go back to our database and we can change the details here. So I can say my name is John and my last name is Snow and my age is 28. And now if we go back and we refresh the page, there you can see, sure enough, our name is changed. So that's it, guys. We've covered how to save data to the Firestore database, how to retrieve data from the Firestore database, and also how to set up security rules for your Firestore database. I hope you found this useful, and please let me know in the description below what else you would like to see, what other tutorials or videos you would like to see with HTML and Firebase. Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.